WoW was saved. The war within was meant to end WoW. This new interview is crazy. So there was a new interview done with Chris Metzen where he kind of revealed where the war within lore was supposed to take us, where it does take us, and where the entirety of the World Soul Saga is going to take us. So some big reveals here, some really cool stuff. No spoilers, but some fun things on how the story of the World Soul Saga was developed. Let's see what Doran has to say.
The most recent Blizzard interview is absolutely crazy as we learn that the entire Saga storyline was actually supposed to happen in this expansion of War Within, and this might...
I'm sorry, I'm laughing. The Wait Within. Yeah, for all the time-gated stuff, Hinkle, that actually freaking made me laugh.
Get wrapped up
great
World of
expansion
Warcraft
title.
as we know it. Then Chris Metzen returned, realized this could turn out to be a fiasco, and they can't tell this much storyline in a single expansion, so they decided to build 3 instead. It's likely that originally Rootlands was supposed to be a part of the release patch, 11.1 was supposed to be midnight content related to Karesh, and 11.2, the ultimate finale, would be what would be the last Titan content. Instead,
Oh, I could see how the Blizzard would have done that. Honestly, totally makes sense. Those patches, they would have been some good content. That would have been some jam-packed expansion content right there. It would have been on the level of Legion, where we're getting major storylines in every single patch. I am going to say, like, for the most part, the War Within, the story is kind of, it's teetered off a bit. I like the story. I like where they've taken us. I really love the Hallowfall lore. The Earthen, they're cool for what they are, but their lore really just doesn't go beyond the first kind of opening sequences of this expansion. So it does feel like it's a little bit dragged out. Like, yeah, maybe they did kind of remove some stuff and spread it out over the other expansions. But for the most part, I'm not going to say the story's not good. It's just not that exciting right now. It does feel like we're waiting for something to happen. Maybe we'll get some of this ethereal stuff in the end, and it'll be cool.
all of this was moved. This entire expansion was completely improvised. I mean, they recycled a BFA map, which explains why everything kind of feels so disjointed so far. So what is all this information that we've learned from the Blizzard panel, and what really is the War Within? What if former Blizzard developers built a game that is like a mix of Dark Souls and Tarkov? Well, you would get Legacy, Steel, and Sorcery, a super cool fantasy PvP PvE game. To put it simply, this game is as hardcore as it gets. You drop in with your loadout, explore dark and dangerous dungeons, fight monsters, and of course, most important, the other players. And if you survive, you get the loot, but if you die,
I think I saw a streamer streaming this the other day.
You can choose your own playstyle, so a full-on glass cannon wizard, a beefy frontline warrior, or a sneaky rogue. Each class has a deep skill tree, gear upgrades, as well as a steep skill curve, requiring quite a bit of strategy to be able to win. There are solo, duo, and trio modes, but of course the higher the stakes, the bigger the loot. Even better, new seasons drop every 3 months. First one is live right now with 3 new maps, a brand new wizard class, and a ton of content.
Cool.
Right now the game is 25% off until May 22nd, so if you're into brutal PvP, PvE, and big loot moments, check out Legacy, Steel, and Sorcery right now with my link in the description below.
There it is.
Interesting enough, based on the recent interviews, it appears that the pre-patch for Midnight is going to be coming by the end of this year, which means that Midnight is likely coming out somewhere around January.
By the way, end of this year, pre-patch, you know what else is coming by the end of this year then? Player housing, that's right. Blizzard already said that it is pre-patch content, so I don't know if it's going to require you to pre-order the expansion to get it. Blizzard probably wouldn't do that because that would just bring a lot of bad press. You're probably going to get like mounts and shit for pre-ordering. But yeah, pre-patch content is going to be player housing. So that means by the end of this year we'll have that.
Which is crazy fast, and this most importantly means that the War Within is literally wrapping up in just a few months, making this the most fast-paced WoW expansion we've ever really had. Now, let's be completely real. I mean, so far,
expansion reveal Gamescom probably
has happened in terms of the main storyline in this expansion. I mean, sure, we got a ton of new lore, ton of new world-changing, lore-breaking information, but that all really is a setup for the future. But
when is Gamescom this year? I'll have to look that up. Legion Remix November. Yeah, Legion Remix will basically carry us through the holiday period towards at the end of this year. Yeah.
The main storyline itself, we got a few filler, like more evergreen-like patches, and the story barely even moved since we arrived to Kazgar at the start of Zeltet. Destroyed the Alaram, Illyria broke the Dark Heart, the Zeltet got the goblins to fix it, and now the Tyrios have stolen it, but that is really it. I mean, really nothing crazy, and a lot of the story has been said to be filler by the community, and looks like the community was actually right, because we did get a PAX.
Yeah, here it is. Gamescom will be August 20th to the 24th. Could be. They could give us certainly the expansion reveal as he was showing it earlier. That could happen then. And then you got pre-patch, right? Expansion reveal, end of the summer. Gamescom, end of the summer. I think that lines up pretty well. That's most likely when they'll do it. We'll probably get some cool cinematic or something, and then they'll give us a tentative date maybe, or like a roundabout date of when pre-patch is actually going to hit for this thing. Probably pre-orders will go live then as well.
Filler by the community, and looks like the community was actually right, because we did get a PAX WoW panel where this was more or less like soft confirmed by Blizzard themselves, as they gave us insight into the behind the scenes of how a single expansion turned into a 3 expansion saga. We've kind of known this intrinsically already, that the return of Chris Metzen was a huge crossroads for Blizzard and World of Warcraft, as they fired most of the previous lore team, made some giant changes to everything.
Yeah.
Chris Metzen himself said in the interview last year on
Thank God we're done with this fucking lore. This freaking simp right here, man. The simp of all simps. Where is he now? Jerking off in the mall, hoping his girl shows up and actually rescues his ass? He literally died for Sylvanas. And now he's just sitting around doing absolutely nothing in the mall. The Simp's cautionary tale.
Last year on the official WoW channel that he came to WoW when they were already finalizing and building the War Within, and they had a lot of work to steer the ship in a different direction to actually build the saga. This change made the War Within really feel super disjointed, because you might have actually noticed this if you've been playing the expansion, because let's be real, I mean, the story so far doesn't make much sense just from a geographical perspective, amongst other things. I mean, the World Soul Saga opens with the Sword of Sargeras on Kalimdor in Silitus, then we are in some random underground zone called Kazagard. After that we're going to Quatalaus, the Eastern Kingdoms.
I mean, the relation to the sword is that it affected the Halofal crystal, so the crystal started going between void and light after the sword struck the planet. Okay, that's fine. I agree there's not like a super strong tie-in as to why the hell we are in Kazalgar for this long, but it's a slight tie-in. Look, the story is fine. I think the story is fine, but it does feel a bit stretched out, and it's for a reason, because it is stretched out.
That we're going to Northrend. Well, the reason for that is because, as they told us on the panel, this story was all supposed to happen in the War Within. It was all supposed to be contained in this one giant expansion.
Right.
Very likely Qualtalas and Northrend would never happen, but probably it was all supposed to occur on Kanzakar and everything with Beledar and all this information. And this really kind of makes sense when you look at the patches that we have. We already have what appears to be some cut content that we've kind of data mined, but very likely we were supposed to get 11.0 as the opening of the War Within with the actual Rootland zone and the main content that we currently have.
That makes sense, because even the Horonier, as I like to call them, they seem very like irrelevant. Like for this whole expansion race that we just discovered, and they're like the missing link or something. We kind of talked to them. She's real curvy. I don't even remember her name right now, but we talked to her, Orwena, right? Horwena, as I like to call her as well. What the hell's going on? Okay, she had her vision. We talked to her for a little bit. We did some quests with these guys, and then we kind of left them. So, I mean, even that storyline feels like, okay, like they dropped it to pick it up later because they didn't want to finish it out too quick.
That zone definitely appears to be.
We'll see if these guys still become playable
so far,
too.
Then very likely 11.1 was supposed to be Karesh, aka the midnight portion of the story, and 11.2 is the finale of this expansion. Very likely supposed to be Last Titan ending that will play on the storyline we got from the Shadowlands. However, luckily for us, I do think Blizzard managed to avoid a huge fiasco here akin to the Shadowlands when Chris Metzen returned, as he said that there is way too much story here to be told in one expansion, and that they should instead just spread it into 3 different expansions as like one giant one with a single storyline. Honestly,
and Metzen actually said in another interview that he did take inspiration from the Infinity Saga, right? From the Marvel Infinity Saga, which, you know, say what you want about modern day Marvel, the Infinity Saga was freaking badass. That was a well-executed saga. That was a great freaking time, man. I remember watching Endgame in the theaters the night that it was released. What a momentous occasion that was. Theater was going nuts. So he took inspiration from that, right? Which is, if you kind of listen to that, you kind of get to the point where, like, okay, so we're taking our L in Midnight then, kind of like they did in the Marvel saga, right? In Infinity Saga, they lose to Thanos. That happens, and then they got to go do the whole reverse time shit to get back. I hope we don't play with time too much in this and these coming expansions in the World Soul Saga. I think it's kind of like a waffly way to do lore, but we'll see. But it's already been said. We're taking our L at Midnight, much the same way that the Avengers did in the second of the Infinity Saga movies.
It seemed like this was indeed the right choice, but in order to do that, they had to do a crazy restructure of the content, and for this, the War Within definitely suffered. For example, if you can see the recent artwork from the concept art studio that I've covered in a few videos, you can see that during Shadowlands, they already hired a studio to figure out this expansion. From the interviews, we know that the Zerlak caverns in Dragonflight were literally just experiments for the underground expansion, the War Within, and by the time Chris Metzen came, they had already nearly finished the expansion, created all the assets, the storyline and everything. However, on BlizzCon, like a few months later, he told us the next two are being worked on, Midnight and The Last Titan, so
yeah,
this kind of came out of nowhere. This implies that this might have just originally been War Within content that was spaced out and just used as a
it's probably not just War Within content, it's War Within content that's been expanded upon and added upon by Chris Metzen, but certainly I can see how all of it was meant to kind of be in the War Within to begin with. It's hard not to work with time when Aman'Thul comes into play at some point. That's true. That's true. Aman'Thul is the time titan, basically. So, yeah, there probably will be some time play going on at that point. But maybe we reverse time and undo the L. That would be like freaking exactly the Infinity Saga. We'll see.
But expansion.
We already have alternate timelines, much like the Infinity Saga did. We have alternate, AU Draenor. We can go there, maybe gather up some items that don't exist in our world anymore. Who knows?
Likely that the revamp of Kotalas was
go
never
back and get Dalaran again.
Anything to do with the Sunwell, neither was a Northern revamped, but they figured out that these two zones and the return to Azeroth would resonate well with the audience. So by creating this space, they now have a ton of room to build full expansions out of this one storyline. However, the main expansion that was dissected to be able to be turned into this saga project definitely ended up suffering, and this explains a bit of the mess that is the War Within, at least up to this point. If you have been following the lore, you have definitely noticed this. This also explains why they're coming up with content so fast. I mean, we're getting new patches like every month or two, which is absolutely crazy, and that is probably because...
Well, I mean, yeah, we get the new patch, but we don't get all the content in the patch. It's been sketchy at times for them to hold on to this 8-week patch cadence. I see that they're trying their best to do it. I still feel like Horrific Visions were not meant to be held off from the launch of this patch, that they just weren't ready, and that's why we didn't get them until now. But I mean, yeah, they are moving quick, so that is the positive. As also as an alternate, Elisande is wandering around the time stream somewhere. Yeah, there's some alternate universe characters wandering. I mean, what are the Magar orcs? Those are literally all fucking alternate universe orcs that are wandering around our world now.
Because they had already built this in the past, so they had kind of a backlog to work from. For example, we also recently learned that Undermined was never originally planned, and that the lead game designer Eon requested for them to introduce Undermined, since the expansion is underground based anyway. And this was also heavily requested in the past within the community, but realistically, it really has nothing to do with the saga. So all of this kind of explains the randomness.
Yeah, it kind of does feel like a side story. Like, literally, they could have done without the Gallywix trying to fix the Dark Heart and just the Ethereal somehow get the Dark Heart. Like, they could have done that, yeah. But I think the Goblin patch and Undermined, overall, the zone it's cool. It's a nice, well-done zone. The patch was good. I think the raid is good. It just felt like a little bit, drawn out.
Of this expansion so far, for example, starts out with the Sword of Sagias, but it is never mentioned again. Then the first patch makes sense, but it's really not a robust storyline. After that, the next patch is Undermine, where it really does feel like they just shoehorns out that storyline here, and now next is Kardesh, most likely, which kind of feels like we're just going from Kalimdor to Northrend to Outland to everything. Like,
it also does feel like Gallywix had like a bigger build-up to his story, and then all of a sudden abrupt end. He still might have something to do in the Shadowlands later on, but his ending was kind of like, oh, All right, Galawix is done.
Doesn't really make all
moving
that
on.
much sense. Like, why are we going all across the place? Now, if you guys might have remembered, and I've covered this many times in the past, but there is this zone called the Rootlands that was on the original development map. We figured this out a while ago, and
Where's
it was
Boishi? Good
supposed to
morning.
be there in the actual release with the Haranir, yet nothing happened so far. And we've been speculating that this would be 11.1 or 11.2. We all know of the World 3 Luna here, Kazakar, and the connections. I've covered this a million times. We've data mined the Haranir ages ago to be super developed. Most of us.
Yeah, the Arnir, as I said before, like what's going on with their story, says the guy who hasn't beaten Heroic Galley. You're saying, because I'm saying that it's been drawn out. Yeah, that's why I said the story. Okay, the story's been drawn out a little bit. The content, no, the raid, this is typical. We have the raid, okay, for this amount of time, for this season, seasonal content and everything. No, it's all been on time. It's just the story feels a little bit drawn out, that's all.
Believed this would be the next Allied Days, then we actually got them in the official release cinematic, but we have still not gotten that zone yet. It does appear that this was supposed to be a part of the initial release, and it was supposed to be just like a regular zone we would get through in 11.0, and then we would get the big Resh storyline and a giant void invasion, and probably something with Beledar and Zelda's plan finalizing, and all of this would lead us into the ultimate finale in 11.2, which would probably be based in Northrend and the giant world prison and the Titans built in ancient history. It could potentially be an Order scenario, or it could also be happening in Kazakar, because we figured out the world core is in Kazakar, so we might have never even visited Northrend in the first place. Now, as you would imagine, this would really be the end of World of Warcraft as we know it, as they would pretty much use like 90% of the villains, characters, the content in just this one expansion.
He's right. I mean, yeah, and they're gonna use all this content over the World Soul Saga. I'm so tired of those void villains. Well, here's the thing, like what Doran's saying is right about in terms of like core WoW lore, right? You got the void, the light, and all that stuff's going to be used up. It's all going to be used up pretty much by the end of this World Soul Saga. Do we have this Light Emperor on the other side of the planet that could lead to something else with the light later down the line? Maybe. But I do feel like once the World Soul Saga is done, whatever they're making post World Soul Saga is going to be like a soft reset to the lore almost. It's going to be a back to the basics, maybe new continents on the other side of the planet, back to just running through green Shire-like lands, little villages everywhere, killing a Hogger or something. I don't know how they will reset our power at that point, but it's going to be like almost a WoW 2-esque reset. I don't think they'll ever launch anything called WoW 2, but I think the closest thing to what we're going to get to what would be a WoW 2 is going to be post-World Soul Saga.
We'll
see if I'm right about that.
We'll deal with Zelatat, Titans, conspiracies,
all used up, just
pretty
like
much most of the interesting stuff that they have to work with. So it really does appear that Chris Metzen's decision was right.
It's gonna be the current Marvel phase. Let's hope not. Let's hope not. Okay, that would be bad. That'd probably be the end of WoW. I don't know if WoW could survive a current Marvel phase.
Could really be fleshed out further and actually
it'd be time to play the Riot MMO at that point.
Be a legit storyline. So because of this, I think they now started developing the Arati in the Arati Highlands, as we could see in the newest patch BTR. They started foreshadowing the Emperor, the Light Arati Empire, very likely for the future WoW content, potentially after the saga. Then they brought a whole revamp expansion, which was heavily requested. They decided to do the one patch as a whole expansion, and 11.2 is probably just going to be essentially just like a bridge into Midnight that will explain why we're now suddenly going to the Sunwell. Then they started really foreshadowing the Titan stuff.
Sunwell definitely going to be relevant. I keep imagining this current Marvel phase, what you mentioned, like what would be the equivalent of Doomsday, because now they brought Robert Downey Jr. back to be Doctor Doom to try to save the Marvel universe. I don't know what that would be like in World of Warcraft. Could you imagine like the current phase is just so shit after the World Soul Saga? All of a sudden they have a mask reveal and it's Arthas Menethil. Like, hey, I'm back. And then everyone goes nuts. Like, oh my god, we brought back a big villain. Yes, okay, try to save WoW with Arthas again. Fucking Lich King has had to carry the WoW on his back. Lich King and Illidan are basically carrying WoW. They've carried WoW for a long time in terms of lore.
And even at the end of Dragonflight for the big Northern
Ridicron's a good one. We'll see what he does.
And the True Titan Goal, which is going to be like the huge finale of this saga, which, as I said, kind of let the first page of the saga better. I mean, they literally just recycled the map from BFA for the first minor patch. It just added some storyline on top of that. Then they added Undermine, which could really be evergreen content, a part of whatever expansion in the future. Now, I think that 11.2 is likely going to be about Karesh, but it will probably be a super watered down version of what it was supposed to be like. I think they probably originally built something with the Ethereals and the Warlords for like the final raid, similar to Antares, but now that we're getting Midnight, this is likely delegated as just a patch zone. So personally, I think we can expect 11.2 to actually be pretty big, as it might have been created as the finale of this giant storyline, but it just ended up becoming a transition patch for Midnight. It will definitely be interesting to see how this actually plays out, as so much stuff has really been built for this expansion, but nothing really happened yet. We got the entire Eluna here, World Tree lore with the Haranir and everything, and something hidden under, potentially Azeroth's actual world soul being in this zone. But in just half a year, we're going to the Eastern Kingdoms. Of course, we still got 11.2.5, 11.2.7 to do, so it could introduce the World Tree and a few other things, which could make sense, because it does seem like the second major patch is going to be all about Ethereals and Karesh. Realistically, Rootlands that we've been talking about for a year now was supposed to be a regular questing zone.
I'm not interested in Rootlands anymore. I hope they don't go there. I don't want to learn about the roots and the corruption of the old gods and how the curvy ass Horanir and Horwaina, you know, we're trying to protect the roots from the old gods. I don't want to give a shit about that. Let's just move on and go to the other lore.
Something like
go do
Hellfall,
ethereal
so
lore.
it could be used for the 2 minor patches and some content that could fix some loose ends. The only thing that I find super interesting and very realistic is that, as I said, 11.2 could actually be very big. I mean, 11.1 was decently big with you driving and a brand new city, but based on this entire interview, 11.2 content with likely Kalash was essentially supposed to be like a major expansion finale. I'm talking about a finale that could potentially wrap up World of Warcraft as we know it. So they might have built a seriously big zone akin to Argus, for example, like when we defeated Sargeras at the end of Legion. I mean, that patch back in the day could literally be a mini expansion in itself with how big the zones were. So it's totally realistic that 11.2 could be similar with something crazy happening, and it might not just be like a filler super linear zone akin to an island. Of course, we will have to wait and see though, as it is possible that this content was actually moved for Midnight, so 11.2 could also be improvised as well. Thanks for watching. Check out the 4th questline of the PTR, heavily foreshadowing the Sunwell and what really happened there by clicking on the screen, and check out my second channel for real world history by clicking on the screen as well. See you next time.
I do think that we're going to get ethereal lore going into this finale. I think the Rootlands kind of been shelved as like well, was it really important? Okay, we don't got to learn more about the old gods. We're going to get old god lore in 11.1.7. We've already seen that. That's all going to happen. The Xal'atath lore and everything else. And then it's going to go straight to ethereal shit, Karesh and everything else. To finish out this expansion with a bang. Honestly, if we go to Karesh, that'd be a nice finish for sure. I'd be excited for that. Nice video from Doran.